Government, we have Maynard A. In opening opposition, we have PAN. In closing government, we have Arka, Gdynia, Kurwa, Swinia. And in closing opposition, we have something Stan. My name is Alex. I'm going to be chairing this final, and judging with me are Barish, Carolina, Calix, and Cheryl. The motion for the final reads, this House welcomes the commercialization of national symbols. Good luck to all teams. Somebody been banging? I already have. So again, to all speakers, if you do not wish to be recorded, do tell us before the beginning of your speech. Without further ado, I welcome the Prime Minister. Hear, hear.
All right, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we think that the symbols of national identity are a very important thing for the state for many reasons. For instance, it carries the value system, it carries the history, the culture, and lots of things about the country, right? Also, it has a very important factor in communicating what your state looks like, what your state does, what are the values, what we believe in, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, it also creates unity, of course, in the state. It's important for individuals to have like a unifying symbol or idea to follow. And what we say is that we think it's a great idea to use these symbols for commercialization, meaning that, for instance, putting it on different kinds of goods which we sell abroad, or we put it to when we are exporting something, then we put the logo there, so on and so forth. So in general, what we say is that we think that it's a very good idea to, through commercial products to send our symbols all over the world. Essentially, we have. Yeah.
Does national symbols include David Beckham?
You see, the thing about national symbols is that they are created over time, right? Meaning that we can't say that this is, this isn't. So at some point, if many people in the state believe that David Beckham is our national symbol, then of course we can't deny that it is. Essentially, we have two big ideas. First of all, the idea is why branding your country is important. I will use a nice example from our home country, which is Estonia, and I will talk about how Estonia has been effectively branding itself, and I really hope that, thank you, I really hope that all of you know that Estonia is an IT country. Second point is that branding is not only important in order to communicate what your state is about, but it's also important control mechanism of saying the things you want to say to the outside world, right? So it's not only about getting all the benefits we are going to talk about, but it's also important to to show what you think your state should be. All right. So branding on the
Clarification.
Okay.
Can you just give me like a couple of examples of things you think are and aren't national symbols? There's going to be some grey area.
Okay. Let's do it. Let's say a flag of a country, coat of arms, Statue of Liberty, Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, like whatever are national symbols, right? Okay, so first of all, when we are branding a country, we are promoting values, right? And what we think is that nowadays, states are not anymore a group of people who are doing different kinds of jobs, but rather it's about focusing on specific areas you're good at. As an example, Estonia, right? Estonia has decided that it's very, very reasonable to focus on IT because it has a very low entry barrier. At the same time, you can buy people together and be successful in IT. Meaning that this is one thing what you can do through branding, right? So if you are using the Estonian flag everywhere and say, we are IT country, then this is a very concrete message given to people in the IT sector all over the world. Second point is, like, branding gives you tourism. No, thank you. Because through branding, like everybody says, if you go to London, you have to see Big Ben, or have you seen Big Ben? No, then you definitely have to go. Meaning that there are some symbols all around the world which people want to see, which is important to see, and so on and so forth. Further, political cooperation, right? very important message if you want to cooperate with different countries. One way is to do it through symbols, and when you commercialize the symbols, you communicate more, meaning that you give a more clear representation of the country. For instance, like Estonia puts the IT flag or uses its own national symbols in different ways of branding, so the country is essentially marketed all over the world. So essentially what happens is that if the country is able to use these national symbols in a way that it is promoted all over the world, many things happen. First of all, most probably people want to go live there. For instance, if you have a national symbol of forest, which is in Estonia, you can say that Estonia is a place where there is lots of nature, it's a very good place to be, meaning that people most probably are considering moving there. So you get more labor, right? This is one point. The second point is, for instance, if you use the national symbols to promote that Estonia is hard-working people, you can then get more investments from different countries because they know that Estonians are hard-working people, right? So the use of national symbols in there is a way to, first of all, is a way to communicate not only kind of, you can't just say Estonia, but you use the national symbols in a way that it gives more impact, right? Okay, and now the second point. The problem with the world is that people think about stereotypes. Which means that very often if we see some kind of symbols, then we have some kind of stereotypes about the country. This is in many ways problematic, just because of the fact that if this brand has been used only nationally, then the outside world has its own implication on the country, meaning that you can't direct the ideas people think about your country. For instance, if you never put the German flag or you kind of don't convey the ideas of your country in the present, then this means that people have the idea of your country of the past. For instance, if we take again, like, let's take this time the Baltic countries. For instance, for Baltic countries, they are old Soviet Union countries, well, maybe you know the flag, but you don't know much about them, meaning that if you see the symbol doesn't tell you anything, and which means that in some communities or in uncontrolled channels, what happens is that the values you are not actually having in this country are attached to these symbols, meaning that you cannot actually promote your country, or when these symbols are presented, it doesn't convey the ideas you want to. So, no, thank you. When you are using the national symbols together with the messages you want to convey, then essentially you're taking away the weapons from people using your national symbols in a wrong way in the future. So, for instance, let's take again Baltic countries. If you use your national symbols all over the place, then this symbol is attached to the value system and the historical and cultural and all the context that you are directing it to. So essentially what we are doing is we are taking the symbols of our nation and we are directing it in a way that all people all over the world who see these symbols think about these symbols as we want, which is important in all those aspects which I told you before, because we want, as state is a brand, and state is not a group of people, just a group of people anymore, then when we can have this message all over the world, then this essentially means that we can achieve the ideas, what I told you before, for instance, more exports or more labor, or people just want to come to live there and so on and so forth. So we see that the direct branding of the country with the national symbols gives us a much more coherent picture as we know it. So for all these reasons, very proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for that fine speech and invite the leader of opposition. Here.
Dear CA team, it's probably quite clear that when you set a motion about national symbols, right, you're going to first have a debate about what a national symbol is, and until you then can have a debate as to whether or not that's good, right? There's a bit of confusion here from inside Open Government as to what a national symbol is. Here's a suggestion from us, like a national symbol is probably something used by a nation, right? That makes a lot of sense. Something that they stand behind and something that they've utilized in the past, right? If we abide by that, then a lot of the stuff that they talk about actually falls out of this debate. notice. They also fail to address the burden that they have when they talk about commercialization, right? Because all the things that they talk about when they say, we're going to label packaging with an Estonian flag, is nothing to do with commercialization, because you're not selling that product in order to be commercial. You're selling that product for that product, right? When we talk about commercialization, examples include things like Che Guevara t-shirts that look stylish that you're selling with that symbol on, right? Swastikas in Thailand, right? That is a national symbol used by the Nazis in Germany that you're selling because the swastika just seems so funny, something I'm going to talk about in my substantive, right? So please do address what commercialization means and use the right type of examples when you're talking about national symbols. But commercialization, we think, in general, is probably something we think is perverted, right? Like, it's a perversion of the initial message that we don't agree with. You're profiting from something that you have not constructed yourself, and you shouldn't be entitled to this outcome, given that you've not literally invested any of your labor into this. Like, national symbols are super powerful, and there's a range of different people impacted that jointly should own the rights to that national symbol that represents them. So we say, firstly, it should solely be the government responsible to enact and use a national symbol. Secondly, in any other context, that national symbol should only be used for educational purposes without a profit motive. Therefore, we stand against commercialization. No, thank you. So some rebuttal as to what we actually get. When they talk about unity being good, like, we say yes, but only if the right institution does this, right? If you use the symbol in the wrong ways, it's unclear why that necessarily gets all those beneficial outcomes that they talk about. They then secondly talk about, like, use of national symbols, you get better messages conveyed internationally. Like, 3 reasons why that's not true. Firstly, we don't think that it's like, well, firstly, we just don't think that an individual should ever have the right to decide about the stereotypization of an entire nation, right? Like, that's literally what they're standing by, and they're saying, oh, I can stereotype Estonia if it's in the interest of Estonia, which falls down to the second problem, right? They never weigh up, no thank you, why it's more likely to be in the interest of that country, given that the examples that we listed, like swastikas in Thailand, actually lead to more harms than the benefits they claim they stand behind, right? So clearly, they're probably more likely to lead to harms on their side, because commercialization usually tries to edge into a point where people buy it, no thank you, which means you need to pervert a certain message in order to get that out there. Unclear why you get all those benefits when you don't get the harms. Like, thirdly, and this is what I pointed out at the beginning, all the stuff they talk about is not what commercialization is used for, right? Like, you're not going to be using, no thank you, a flag in order to promote some sort of message that you want, right? Commercialization literally happens because you want people to buy something. That's not how you get them to buy that. I'm going to talk about more in my substantive, but before that, psychological impacts. No thank you. So like, Thailand love Adolf, right? They really love him. They adore him. They put him on every front newspaper and into the shop windows, and that comes with the swastikas that they sell out for key rings, right? They think it's really funny that Adolf is everywhere and they stick him everywhere. It's so common that there's a TV series that utilizes a swastika as their symbol, right? All of that has happened in a majority culture that literally ignores the minority in their society that are probably impacted by that. So what does that mean? It means that commercialization always works in a way that overlooks the small minorities, given that it has a profit motive and just whatever sells is going to be sold. And the impact is that people of Jewish heritage in Thailand, for example, are going to be exposed to a symbol that reminds them on a daily basis of their family members that have been burnt, right? And given that they probably have a very vivid image painted to them in their education, that is a clear impact on our side, right? No thank you. Not only are they constantly reminded of that, but it literally means that the commercialization of this particular culture undermines the impact that those people have had, right? So they're not only reminded, they're also basically told to shut up about it because it's funny to look at Adolf. Okay, secondly, devaluing culture. If I personally am from a former Soviet country, and I probably have an attachment to the hammer and sickle sign, right? The hammer and sickle sign you now see on so many different t-shirts that people really like because it looks so cool. You care deeply about it, right? It's something that you think has portrayed the rise of communism and something that you thought was good. Now, every time you see it, and someone walks around with that t-shirt, they don't buy it, right? They don't stand behind it, but they directly distress you because you're reminded of the failure in bad history. Now, I know what you judges might be thinking. This isn't enough to warrant a ban, but that's not what we're saying on this side, right? We're not saying you should ban it. We're just saying we're not welcoming what they're standing behind. It's pretty bad that I'm constantly reminded, no thank you, of my past failures, and we think that's enough of a reason to regret it. Okay, wider reaching effects, no thank you. It's important to know what a symbol stands for, right? Like, symbols like the swastika are quite impactful in the way that they describe something that is so horrendous in literally just a symbol. The moment you use something like a Che Guevara t-shirt and you distort the message of that power becomes annihilated, right? You no longer are able to expose something in literally nothing but a symbol that is so disastrous. That means that you have to dive into the details again, right? Yet reminding Jewish people of their heritage and the fact that people have literally been burnt in concentration camps, which we think is horrendous. Openly.
Right. The swastika as well as the hammer and sickle. Which nation do they actually represent nowadays? Which nation symbols are they?
Hilarious, right? Trying to remake from DPM. Good luck with that. Like, obviously the swastika represents Nazi Germany back when they had it on their flag. The hammer and sickle represents the USSR. Those are still national symbols, and they still are national symbols today, that are being used to commercialize things. Like, if you want to actually list examples where that's more current, then do that, but you haven't, so that's what we're left with. Okay, the wider reaching effects of that means that the message is now perverted, and those particular symbols can't be used to the same impact that they were previously, right? Which is really harmful to a lot of those people cut out. And we're not only talking about people that are reminded that the USSR was a failure, but we're also talking about things that are very visual to people, like when you're talking about, I don't know, Adolf, right? Okay. Thirdly, it promotes a culture of adoption, which is really pernicious, right? Suddenly everyone wants to wear a Che Guevara t-shirt, because a Che Guevara t-shirt, as a national symbol of communism, and as it was used in Cuba, right, is something, and by the way, they have conceded that it is a national symbol in some extent, because they said David Beckham might be a national symbol someday, right? So they can't necessarily remake that when they say Nazi symbols aren't national symbols, because they've agreed that anything that people want to make a national symbol, that we have now explained to you needs to have the nation behind it, is probably one, right? In that case, Che Guevara t-shirts are widely adopted and everyone wears them. What is the impact of that? It completely dilutes the actual historical momentum that particular person has, right? So everything that Che Guevara stood for is something that people no longer care about. What they're doing is they're wearing a t-shirt of something they don't necessarily sympathize with, right? We think that is completely harmful to especially those people who are now analogized to that history but have no clue what it was about. Because Adolf was quite a horrible person opposed.
I thank the speaker for that advice and invite the Deputy Prime Minister. Hear, hear.
Thank you for the floor, honourable panel. I'm going to talk about three things. I'm firstly going to talk about this very innovative context of governmental commercialization, which extends upon our original case. Now we'll re-explain to the opening opposition how private commercialization also has the benefits that Oscar already outlaid. And lastly, I will engage in their material, which I think objectively would be named commercialization of symbols of former regimes, which we don't necessarily think fall under this debate, but I'm going to engage with still because we are nice people. Right. Firstly, let me clear out why we don't think that most of their case is relevant to this debate. Because they talked about taking the swastika and commercializing it in Thailand, for instance, right? By their own definition, they said that a national symbol is something that the people rally behind and agree represents their nation. We do not have a nation or a large or a relevant a group of people who think this symbol is representative of their values or cultures. Obviously, there are neo-Nazis and small sects, but no nation behind it, so we don't think it's a national symbol, but a symbol of a former regime, which is no longer relevant, and discussing over commercializing it is not in this topic. Also, we think, like, we should ban it if that's bad, you know? The thing they said sort of also makes sense, but never mind. Let's talk about the topic, actually. What we think commercialization of a governmental symbol could be are a few examples. For instance, yes, you know, if we export from Estonia things to other countries, yes, you know which country it's from, right? Well, we have done, in the terms of to raise awareness of Estonia, we have put our national flower also on that brand that identifies which country it comes from in order to make Estonian symbolism. This, we think, has two positive effects. Firstly, we think that if a person encounters the symbol, national symbol, in another context, they make the association, meaning that they have already a better understanding of what the country represents. That's good because when we think that countries currently are commodities, whether it's for labor, whether you want to work there, what values it represents, whether you want to travel there, what sorts of industry or place it is if you want to invest there. So we think having a more better understanding of different aspects of countries is better for commercial use. Another example could be if they want to talk about personas. So we have named a national airport after the president of the Second Republic, first president, who is very iconic to us. We think that also carries the power. It's a governmental commercialization that carries the power that people who now travel to Estonia might ask themselves, who was this Lennart Meri, by the way, Google it, and they might Google it. Right? So meaning that they actually get a bit more knowledge about Estonia, what we have gone through, why we are awesome, right? So we think that those are the positive effects still stand. Now the private commercialization, I think Oscar gave you very reasonable examples. Putting the Eiffel Tower on a mug, putting I Love New York on a t-shirt. We can agree that the structures are something that are iconic national symbols that people rally behind. Why is commercialization good in that regard? They said that it's perverse because you lose control over in what context these national symbols are used, right? Meaning that they can be construed as something bad. We want to hear examples of where some national symbol is marketed in a negative context, because I would like to posit it wouldn't be very probable, because usually these commercialized national symbols are commercialized within that country for tourists, for instance, right? I Love New York t-shirts are most widespread in New York, Big Ben marks are most widespread in London. Meaning that if you were a company, local, probably at least, if not based, at least operating on a local level, and you would put them in a context which the nation and the people don't agree with, you would be pretty much run out of business or protest against. So you are very unlikely, I'll take in a second, very unlikely to actually use them in a perverse context, but rather you use them in a context which represents the current nation and not the former nation. I will keep on going with that point, but first.
Where are Estonian souvenirs made?
It depends on the souvenir. We have a lot of ember, which is made locally, but also exported from nearby countries. We have a lot of natural, like, different places. It's the correct answer. Anyway, back to the point. The idea of these symbols used in a modern context is important, right? Because some people might not know about smaller countries that much, right? I think Estonia, for a lot of people, is still associated with them being a former Soviet state, Eurotrip was a movie back in my childhood or youth, which sort of portrayed all these European countries as hellholes where you can get cheap booze and prostitutes. We don't think that's representative of our national identity, so we think that using commercialization, which actually increases the spread of the national symbol and the awareness of the values associated with the national symbol, can reshape the identity and associations that other people outside the country make with the country, which leads to the benefits of maybe more people actually traveling here, investing here, and not thinking we're very backward, right? So ultimately we think that commercialization on a governmental level lets you shape your identity and make people more aware. We think the same effects apply when it's done in private commercialization, because they still have the same incentives, and even if they say that if they want to say it devalues the symbol, we want to hear that who is the devaluation towards, because we think local people have already their own associations and attachments and historical knowledge about the symbol, whether it's on a mark. They might not associate it with marks, right? But for them, their representation remains, and for others, it is a way to convene values. Now, let's engage with what they brought. Swastika, like having swastika in t-shirts is bad because it causes psychological damage. To a certain extent, we think it's true, right? Now, on the comparative, they have to prove to us why, like, if they don't want to talk about swastikas not existing in the world at all, then why is the commercial element there, which makes the psychological impact as severe as it would be if it would just be used in a non-commercial context? So, right? So I think the why swastika is offensive is not because it's commercialized, but because people are exposed to it, right? We think people will be exposed to it if we don't ban it anyway, so there is no significant difference on their case. Moreover, what the positive effects of if it's going to be spread, why it should be spread in a commercial context are very specific, because symbols only have power because of context. Swastika is more offensive and fear-striking to individuals and specific minorities if it is held by neo-Nazi groups at a rally. It is less frightening and less powerful if it's worn by a goofy Asian teenager as a prank or ironically, right? Because it's not associated with the negative values and the power it used to represent. So even if they want to have debate, we think we win. If swastikas are going to be widespread, the commercialization of them will actually decrease their power because it will take away the powerful context that they were used to be conveyed in. Opposed?
Thank you, Speaker, for that fine speech, and I invite you to leave the opposition. You're here.
Dear panel, in the speech I will be talking about what commercialization actually means and why we're not talking about just using a tulip whenever we try to sell something made in Holland, but about a lot more things that opening government is trying to ignore. And secondly, I'm going to talk about why even if that would be the debate we're having, we are still saying that the very vulnerable groups that are being harmed are still having a harm that is not justified by, I'm not even sure what the benefit is of putting a tulip on a package you send from Holland, right? So I do not think that the balance of harms in this debate has been addressed properly, right? Let's look at what opening government tells you. And, okay, about this whole definitional debate of what are we actually talking about. Sure, you do not want to take the swastika, then take the North Korea flag or something similar, right? Take any symbol of any oppressive regime that's doing absolutely horrible things right now. I'm sure that falls under a definition that still has the same implications that Ben has told you. You have not engaged with them other than saying, oh, that's outside of the debate, right? Second of all, it doesn't even, like, in the PM speech, he literally has a point about it takes away weapons from others by devaluing meaning. That already implies that some of them will have some sort of negative consequences, some sort of negative implications that will be harmful for some people. That's why he wants to devalue them, right? So I think they're a bit contradictory in trying to establish this whole distinction between what falls under their case and what doesn't, right? But beyond that, they completely ignore what commercialization actually means, because we are not talking about a government controlling how a symbol is being used and a government just branding itself by a symbol. What we are talking about is individuals and companies being able to take those symbols, put them and print them on literally anything they want and sell anything they want with that on them for their own personal profit, right? Because that's commercialization. We're not talking about the branding of a government here, right? So what that also means is that they don't get to control the message that is being sent, because they do not get to control the way in which the symbol is being used. Even if sometimes the Eiffel Tower will be only used to promote tourism to Paris and they will have great outcomes, we don't think that, we haven't heard any reason why it automatically means that it cannot be used on some really, really harmful things, right? We have not used why ISIS cannot put the Eiffel Tower in their propaganda and try to send a message, right? I will take closing.
Who actually should own and actually have say to control those national symbols? Who control them? Who is supposed to have say in that?
So I think who should control them right now are the people, indirectly, since the people in most cases elect their governments, is probably got to be governments. I do acknowledge there will be some gray areas where governments aren't necessarily representative of the people, but what I'm trying to tell you is that Forever 21 shouldn't be able to take random symbols off a random country, produce some clothes in China, sell them to some teenagers in the US, and get away with it, right? Without caring about what the symbol actually represent for the people they have been taken from, right? Because this is exactly why it's so harmful that you cannot control in which way this is being used. You cannot, like, once you commercialize something, like once it is legitimate for anyone to use it for their own for their own profit, you don't change. And actually, government concedes that you are very unlikely to change the meaning it has for the people who see it as important, right? What that means is that exactly the people who are likely to care about these things, either because it has a very strong negative implication for them, as will be some cases, or either simply because it represents part of their culture that they're proud of and that they're now seeing as devalued, because that part of their culture is being ignored while their symbol is being taken away from them. No. The problem is that the harm that will be created to these people is something that cannot be predicted, something that cannot be quantified, and something that cannot be prevented once you commercialize the symbol, right? Just because a symbol might still be used in a horrible way, even under government control, just because we might not have complete law enforcement around the world, is not an argument to say that commercializing all symbols on a regular basis is something that we should welcome and something that we are happy about, right? Let's look, like, the fact that something becomes a national symbol, as the government has told you, that already means, that already implies a very, very strong meaning to a nation, that already implies a very strong connection to something that is very fundamental to the way that nation identifies itself, right? Because we believe that the reason why symbols are so important is because they transcend any type of language barrier or anything else, not because of the symbol itself, not because of, I don't know, a circle or some sort of geometrical form, but because by seeing that, you already know something about the meaning behind it, and you can already think about what that thing stands for without needing to use much more communication, right? That's why they are much more powerful than anything else, and that's why we also use a lot of symbols, even to, I don't know, symbolize what kind of bathroom a man or a woman can use, right? Because it's very easy to convey meaning with symbols once these symbols are out there. The problem with national symbols is that unless you get to define what message comes with that symbol, unless you get to control that, the harm that is being done by someone using it in a harmful way, by someone appropriating it, by someone taking it away, using it for their purpose, and ignoring all the meaning or all the deep emotional meaning it has to your identity. Actually, I'll take opening in a minute. The problem is that the harm that is being done then to the people it's taken away from is something that cannot be undone once it has happened. Yes.
You still lack examples, but your culture is going to be either ignored or misconstrued regardless of commercialization. But the benefit of commercialization is that at least it's going to be more widespread, which means that more people will have knowledge, and since we think in a lot of
no, the problem is when you have a symbol that's widespread, like, that's exactly the thing, right? You're not spreading history books, right? When you have a symbol that is being widespread, there is no word next to it that tells you about the meaning it has for the people it has been taken from, right? So you don't get more awareness about some indigenous cultures in the US when you see a Forever 21 dress with a pattern made of their symbols on it, right? You do not get more awareness. What you do get is that these people are being forced to see those symbols being misused all around them every day. What you are forcing them to see those symbols being stripped of the meaning they have to them every day, and the implication of that is that their culture is irrelevant for the people around them, right? So, because we have shown you a lot of harms that are being created to exactly the people for which you cannot change the meaning that the symbols have, and because we do not think that the government has brought you any benefits that can override that, I'm very proud to oppose.
For that fine speech, and I invite you, member of government, you're here.
Okay, before I proceed to my substantive, which will be on the change of the discourse that is going to happen and on the narrative, I would like to proceed with a few points of rebuttal. First of all, let's proceed to this Adolf and swastikas cases. We believe that, first of all, it is not really important, as in most countries, those symbols are considered illegal and are not in use. And second of all, even treating it as an important symbol, we believe that in most cases, those people are not really aware of those symbols represents. And in this case, the offensive value of that is not so important. And if they really believe in what the symbols represent, I think we have much bigger problems than simply those t-shirts and stuff like that. Second of all, about national symbols being so important, holy, and not allowing an individual that should not have the right to bargain with it, as they didn't contribute to the importance of the symbol. whatever it means, right? This is exactly the message we want to tackle. Exactly this pompous belief that a regular citizen does not merit to undermine their national symbols. It's going to clash perfectly with our extensions, so keep up. Third of all, patriots getting their feelings hurt. We believe that some may not. You know, people have different attitudes, different beliefs. Some of them may believe it is kind of offensive, but others may believe it to be, you know, kind of a commemoration, a cool thing to be done. We believe that there is no plausible mechanism, and it can go in either way. And further of all, we believe that this is not really the most important thing right there. Okay, let me proceed. Discourse about nationality is a big problem in our world. Why? Because we don't really have a real-life discourse about it. Because the holiness of national symbols, the taboo that they represent, people are intimidated by them, by their status. They think that a national symbol is treated only in the context of some, you know, army events, historical celebrations, commemorations, which are by definition very pompous and defined and are actually very often in connection with some, you know, very identity-defining things, such as, I don't know, the deaths of thousands of people and stuff like that. We believe that this emotional baggage leads to people being intimidated and not able to engage in a healthy discourse about nationality. What happens in the status quo discourse is mostly conducted in the world of politics, because those people are kind of believed to be allowed to do so, as their social status and perception of the work they are doing means that they are carrying extremely important decisions in the name of their country, right? So we believe that this discourse is happening only in this level, and what this creates is that even when a discussion happens on national symbols, that is, for example, in the field of the followers of those political parties, it is happening clearly in the field of followers of political parties, right? What does it carry? Is some inherent characteristics of this kind of discourse. It is going to be partisan discourse that is going to be an argument about certain beliefs or political views, which is not necessarily really this down-to-earth, grounded discussion about identity we would like to have. Let's look at the context for a while, right? We are, dear panel, living in a world right now which stays on an ideological turning point. We have a lot of resurgence of right-wing ideologies, right? We have also still a kind of important left-leaning liberal political views. People are hit by contradictory ideologies that are actually making them live in a kind of a vacuum, because they don't really know what to believe in. And let's focus on who is the group that's actually most likely to wear those things, right? For instance, in Poland, patriotic clothing is extremely popular, extremely fashionable. Young people are buying into it. They are buying into what is fashionable, and it is of course they are also expressing their patriotic belief by doing that. So what do we get? We have a group that is mostly affected by that. It's a group of young people who are even more in a vacuum, who are even more lost in this world, because still there are still those Western values coming in from the TV and from stuff like that, but in their school or in their neighborhoods, they might be hit with these right-wing ideologies. So we believe that they are most likely to actually be molded by the future and by the things that are coming into them, right? So what do we need right now is a discourse that is not pompous and which takes place on a very organic level, which has not existed before. We believe that the connection makes wonders in order to achieve that. What we want to achieve is a discussion where holiness... Yeah, okay, wait a second. Yes, what do you want to achieve? And what we are doing is we are achieving a real change in terms of perception or national symbols right now. Why we are doing that? Because actually those flags, those political presidents, those heroes, people like that, they are becoming actually a part of everyday life, right? They're becoming the part of the most everyday stuff possible, right? You are wearing, I don't know, your flag on your t-shirt, you are wearing a hero on your arm, you are wearing, I don't know, a historical event on your sweatpants, stuff like that. I believe that this is actually devaluating the holiness of the symbols, right? It is going to be perceived as something which is important because I'm still going to make choices about my clothing, about how I look, and I'm just choosing it to express my national identity by doing so, right? So it is only a choice that I'm making and saying this is important for me, right? This is something I care about, but it is not, you know, some kind of holy stuff that exists in a vacuum, and I don't have approach to that. Okay. So we believe that this is going to, yes, but first open it.
Yeah, okay. Like, thanks for running our case. Obviously, that has all those harms. But national symbols always come with emotional attachment. Why do you welcome mass psychological harm to minorities?
Whatever. Okay, so we're achieving two main benefits by that, right? First of all, we're achieving a discourse which is triggered to happen, which has an intensity, right? Because when you have, for instance, two schoolmates, right? One of them may talk to each other. Why are you wearing this blouse? What does this guy mean to you? Why this hero that you are wearing is somebody that's important because he's on your blouse, right? We have actually a very plausible situation, because when you are meeting a guy every day and he's your buddy and you do stuff with him, you are not intimidated by those symbols, you're not intimidated by the things he's wearing, because you have a very strong incentive to talk about that. So we achieve a discourse, a very organic level discourse, where those national symbols are a part of your everyday identity, and it is making a totally change of dynamic in this narration, and of course a diminishment of polarization, which is an enormous problem, right? Because those people are talking together, those people are enjoying this kind of discussions, and are actually making their beliefs come closer to each other. We are not living in a divided world where, you know, nationality exists somewhere, but you are not allowed to talk about it, and you are dividing yourself with people who only confirms your belief, and you are never approaching different people. And second of all, we are of course very likely to achieve a number of radicals who are going to become more balanced in their views, because they will not only have political influence coming from above, but also have political influence coming from their peers, which are going to discuss what those symbols matter to them, and they will be able to compare those beliefs and choose what's right for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for that nice speech, and I invite the member of opposition. Here.
When I was speaking at the Cracow Open final last year, humble brag, I was given, as a reward for being in the final, a little model of a Cracow dragon. You know what it says on the bottom of that dragon? Made in China. Estonian souvenirs aren't made in Estonia because the labour isn't cheap. These are mass-produced, shitty, well, often like really cheap goods that are produced in Chinese sweatshops. They aren't what OG was talking about. OG was mostly talking about like propaganda, okay? Like, they talk about states using images to promote their own image. Something that has been done for hundreds of years. That is not something that is relatively new, the kind of commercializing we're taking out. That's why OO are right, and we're emphasizing more so that they fall out of the debate for that reason. What am I going to talk to you about today? I'm going to give you a little bit more context about how this actual commercial industry works. I'm going to talk a bit about the particular psychological effect that using these national symbols has on the people who buy them, who are mostly the domestic audiences that CD talk about, like college people buying their own national symbols, wearing them at like football games, or wearing them around and having them in their own homes. And I'm going to talk about the tangible impact of that, which go beyond just having your feelings hurt, but also like to actually like tangible harms that happen to minority groups and people who suffer. So let's give a little bit more context, okay? So commercialization, mass production, Chinese sweatshops. Now, they're trying to appeal to a mass market of people. So they simple, mass-marketed like symbols that you don't have to put like any kind of messaging or have like any kind of like show or display or parade like you would have done in the past. National symbols are mostly bought, or at least displayed, by the people in the own country that they represent. Why is that? Firstly, because they have the most appeal to them. They inspire the most emotion, the symbols that they would have had around their homes. And secondly, even when like tourists or other people do buy these symbols, like it's not something they tend to wear around every day. They might have like a little collection box. They're not going to be proudly displaying them. So that's where they're going to be the most visible. And that's the most important aspect of this debate. Now, note the incentives that these companies have, okay? These companies have an incentive to market these materials, but they also have an incentive to try and drive up the nationalist feeling in these countries in order to make people buy more of this stuff. Something I've decided to call the commercializing... no, I've lost the word for it. Never mind, I had a good phrase. I'm missing a sheet. Yeah, I'm probably missing a sheet. Oh well. Okay, so they have an incentive. They have incentive to market these particular goods to these people and sell them. And no, these are very simple symbols. So like Polish people at CG say they buy these, they wear them all the time. We think that like on the whole, like we are talking about. We can't limit this debate just to national nations that exist. We probably should also talk about like nations, like nationalist movements that exist in people. So we think that like Confederate flags certainly apply to this debate. We think Nazi flags probably do too, but we certainly think like when people even for like separatist movements as well, these things definitely apply. But what is the effect? We say fundamentally national symbols when mass commercialization has brought these symbols to the masses to be displayed by the members of a national community on a massive scale that just wasn't seen before. So what does this mean? We say that this creates effectively a uniform of national identity amongst a large section of the nationalist population. What's the problem with it? We say fundamentally it's very unreflexive. Why is that? Because if you've got these symbols, and these symbols might represent some things that people find dodgy, like your British flag representing a history of colonialism, or your Confederate flag representing a history of slavery, but that was the thing your parent bought and had in their house for their entire career, you are subject to two biases that make you keep that. The first is just a confirmation bias. You see that symbol, you feel pride, you've been taught to feel pride. When someone suggests that you like some, your group may have actually perpetuated abuses against others, you tend to downplay those and overemphasize the suffering of your own group. Like Poles are like so fixated on the suffering of Poles, like during the Soviet Union, that like today they often find it quite difficult to like provide empathy to other groups, for example, because they often feel like they've always been the victim. Like always feeling like you're the victim allows you to emphasize with your own group, but it stops you from actually emphasizing with other groups. The other bias is a kind of herding effect, a social desirability. The fact is, if you're wearing these, if you've got these national symbols and you've got other people on them, you're going to want to fit in with each other's groups. You're not going to want to call out people because you've kind of got this shared identity, and you want to fit in with them. So you're going to be defensive about your nation. You're not going to want to call it out to other people because they proudly displayed their symbols right in front of you. Not at this time. So, what's the problem with this? These are fundamentally also very exclusive. So, if I am in that nation, if I feel like I'm a Pole but I don't want to wear these symbols, I am kind of excluded from this movement. I'm not wearing the uniform. I'm not actually participating in it. CG says this actually opens up discussion. No, it doesn't. It closes down discussion because you start to limit your discussion to people who share the symbols with you, and you start to build an echo chamber of your own ideas. This wasn't true in the past. In the past, national symbols were much less widespread. So you know them and you'd see them, but you wouldn't be wearing them in a uniform. They wouldn't like conjure up images that would make you defensive. You could have your own kind of patriotism, which would be different from other people, and it wouldn't form like a homogenous effect where you all kind of try and merge together and form the same collective view of your national identity. I'll go on to the impact of this exactly by opening.
Right. If local population is the main consumer of these symbols, then the idea of mass production has no relevance in this debate, since local people will still have from historic times the soldier uniforms or just not mass-produced symbols that they can rally behind and talk about.
No, because this is mostly about Polish people wearing Polish scarves and like English people having like flags on their house. Like that's mostly what this is about. Like some people like who have a lot of money can buy fancy national symbols, but like those are more like that's a very niche area of the debate which we don't want to talk about particularly. Impact and comparative. So we say that like this causes an empathy gap when you overemphasize the suffering of your own group and can't see the suffering of other people. This means you have often things like less care for people who are suffering in other places, like in refugee crisis, and you're less likely to want to actually help these people and provide state resources or policies to help these people. You might see them as threats. You might become antithetical to minority groups who don't want to participate in your particular national symbols and embitter them with policies. You might start to become like, because you can often wear these in groups and they serve as a uniform and diminish your own sense of self. In groups of like football matches and Euros, for example, this can cause people to like English and Russian fans to become more violent because there's a diminished sense of responsibility. The result is like it's much more than just having your feelings hurt. Like minorities feel threatened and suffer actual harms of violence and policies and persecution against the state as governments like peace crack down on them really unfairly as a result of these policies. So you feel threatened. So contrary to CG, this doesn't open discussion up, it closes it down and excludes minorities, and more than the psychological harm, we have the utter threat and intimidation of minorities on a massive scale due to the widespread spreading of these particular symbols. We're happy to oppose.
speech, and I invite the government whip. You're here.
Can I start? So the wise person in my life, meaning Karolina Partyga, said to me one thing one time, that if society does not express homophobia or racism and not talks about it, it's really bad, because it means that they are hiding this problem, they don't want to talk about it and closing the discourse. On their side of the house, and in status quo, we have, without those symbols, we have situations in which the discourse is closed. They cannot claim that because the discourse couldn't be more close on their side of the house, because we have racism everywhere. We have prejudice against minorities, we have prejudice against immigrants, for the precise reason that we are not doing anything from the slapping each other in the political, on the political level, or with expression of the national pride during the history classes or the I don't know, sport matches. This is the only thing of the expression of the discourse that they having on their side of the house. What we are having is at least something, at least people who can, from the modern side of this world, who wear those hoodies as a, I don't know, expression of their being ironic, or just because they like it. You have anything to actually have any discourse and people actually talking about it. So, like, firstly mitigating what they said. We believe that precise reason why can we discuss and we can say and we condemn the swastikas being like that is because we have commercialization. Because without it we couldn't condemn that there are some specific symbols that in any circumstances shouldn't be used, shouldn't be widespread. Because it was widespread, we as society, we as these debaters could stand in here and condemn swastikas as being things that look cool and sound cool. So basically they are talking about the incentive to produce. Maybe that the companies that are producing these goods, they have no other agenda than profit, because that's what companies are doing. That they are creating the point about about the China that is creating actually these souvenirs. If so, what is the China actually incentive to spread nationalism in Poland or in Cracow or whatever? They are not explaining as that, it doesn't exist. So basically, what do you have? The really relevant clash point between, despite the souvenirs that First Tables want to talk about, is whether what kind of discourse will you have, and whether this discourse will actually occur. So we are telling you that the situation without that couldn't be more worse. When there are no actual engagement with the individuals who can actually talk about it, who should talk about it, there is the only playing field is actually violence, because people can attack each other having the radical views in which they are not actually talking with each other, but actually hurting each other, because the discourse isn't started in the first place. The second thing, you can have political discourse which is so far from the people who are actually expressing some different national feelings, who are not actually represented properly by those politicians, but are creating false narrative that there is one group which loves the country and second group which hates the country. What we are telling about that, because there are those national symbols, because you can have Polish people wearing cursed, I don't know, soldiers, something like that on their shirt. I can approach my friend in which I am with micro society in school. I'm like, I don't know, playing football with him or whatever. I can approach him and tell to him, hey guy, do you really know what you are supporting? Do you really know that the things that those people done? We believe that is the only mean to, in those countries in which you have strong national feelings, to debunk these myths, because those people are so close-minded from the power that's coming above. They are so close-minded from the radical views that are happening and they feel as a threat that there is no other means that actually tackle them on the micro level, on the little society society that they can actually engage with because they are right now living it. Because the condemnation or the feeling of that coming from your friend is much more stronger, and you're gonna feel it as much more relevant to you, or gonna actually acknowledge it. That's the precise reason in which we are, in which those condemnations can happen. I will take up.
Okay, you agree that national symbols always come with an emotional attachment. Why do you welcome mass psychological harm to minorities? But
Thank you. It's saying we are repeating this point for the third time. What is the harm that right now nationalists are doing to minorities? Huge. And we believe that is the bad thing. That because we don't have this discourse, because they are closing this discourse, because they are not using any means to open this discourse, this is the precise reason why minorities and people will be oppressed over and over again. People who are not actually seeing themselves on the each side of the spectrum, people who are not protected right now, people whose views are condemned right now in the politics because they are, for example, in Poland, far right movements going to the power, and they are appearing in the national TV because those minorities that are like leftists and would be likely to engage in dialogue, they are precisely harmed by them because you have no actual discourse happening on their side of the house. So basically, what is the end goal of this debate? If we can challenge people's views, not necessarily destroy them. We don't want to wipe out nationality because that would be a really bad thing. But if we can take that, we can challenge some people, some radicals, to not be as condemned as they are right now in those beliefs. We are winning this debate. For what reasons? Firstly, you get much less radicalization. That means that those minorities will be more likely to not be oppressed. Two, people actually thinking about what nationality means and whether these national symbols are actually good, whether I should wear it, whether this things is thinking through. We believe that's the huge positive part of that. And for the third time, if we can debunk myths that are happening in the political discourse to the extent that society is talking about it, and to the extent that society is engaging with anything that that is happening right now in the status quo and in the politics. You have politics that are you have radicals that have much more less power when it comes to discourse from above coming from politics. If you want to have less harm to minorities, if you want to have any discourse about nationality, vote our government.
For that fine speech, and I invite the opposition list. You're here.
May or may not pee myself during this speech. It's poor bathroom time management, but Dear panel, this debate is not about whether Estonia is able to attract 5,000 tourists more to come and visit their country. Neither this debate is about whether some Jews in Thailand will be offended by saying swastika areas. This debate is primarily about who is able to define patriotism and on which terms. And what we bring into this debate is that via the process of mass commercialization of national symbols and patriotic symbols, far-right groups and nationalistic groups are able to hijack the patriotic discourse and are able to push their own agenda into the mainstream under the cover of patriotic symbols. This is the biggest harm in this debate. This is a direct and immediate threat to the minorities. This is the most immediate threat that we bring you in this debate. Therefore, we clearly win it. Right before I go and rebut the CG case, let us spend some time thinking about the word commercialization that is used in this debate. Like, we believe that that in the first half it was rightly pointed out that commercialization is when private actors engage in an act of mass producing patriotic symbols. Dear panel, we ask you to think about which private actors are most likely to engage in mass manufacturing of patriotic symbols. Will it be liberals who really like to distance themselves from the patriotic symbols and are rather ashamed of showing pride in their own nation in most countries? Or will it be far-right groups or nationalistic groups that have not only like an ideological incentive to get more of these symbols in the public sphere, but also they have an economic, like a profit motive once they start to mass produce patriotic symbols, right? This is exactly how it worked out in Poland with the Kurd soldiers industry. This is exactly how it works out in the United States with people mass producing Confederate flags, spreading all of the meanings that is attached to the Confederate flag in the southern states. This is exactly how it works in many other countries. You can have UK as an example when you had populistic backlash and people started to mass buying the jag and put it on their houses, and you have an example of Marine Le Pen abusing the tricolor in France as well. That's an example, right? Okay, so let's look closely at the CG's case, which we believe is it engages in the most important clash in this debate, whether what is happening to the internal discourse within a country where you have mass production of patriotic symbols. Well, they're saying that they want to strip the national symbols of this like sacred allure. They want them to ubiquitous. They think it's better if they're ubiquitous. We believe that it's bullshit, right? We believe that once these symbols are ubiquitous, you get all of that harmful psychological effect that Billy brought you in this debate. Like you have herd mentality, you have confirmation bias, you have this feeling of this like homogeneous, like narrative homogeneous group, and you're far less likely to challenge this narrative in any way. Like you're less likely to stand out because you're afraid of standing out if everyone is wearing your national colors all around you, right? This is a harm that is possible only when you have mass commercialization of patriotic products. Note that we are paying attention to this aspect in this debate. Secondly, they go on and they say, yeah, it's okay if a lot of people are wearing these products, even if they don't do it in a reflexive manner, even if they just follow the herd. That is still okay because once you move them to the down to the earth level, you're able to challenge the people who wear these symbols. We believe that this is very implausible, right? I mean, take the example of Mateusz challenging his colleague wearing a Polish patriotic symbol in a schoolyard somewhere in the school. Like, what do you think will be most likely the response of his colleague? Well, when his feelings are validated at every step thanks to the process of mass production and distribution of these patriotic symbols, right? He would never think that he's doing anything wrong. He would never think that he's indirectly supporting nationalistic agenda or anything like that. Or even if so, he would be happy with that because the message that he gets from the media, from the other people that are wearing this kind of patriotic props, is that it is okay to be fixated on showing your national pride time over and over again, and he won't be likely to challenge his views at all, right? Okay, before I go into my substantive, a question from closing.
Okay, what kind of national symbols were being commercialized during the rise of fascists in the Europe of the 30s?
Well, okay, I see your point here, and this exactly proves our point, how nationalist movements have to switch from wearing swastikas and Celtic cross because we banned these symbols, and so what they're doing now is they're settling for more neutral patriotic symbols that's symbol neutral, and they're simply are interweaving them within their own agenda, and via that process they're able to push the nationalistic agenda and push the foreign agenda more into the mainstream under cover of patriotic symbols, and at the same time simultaneously they're able to contaminate the patriotic narrative with nationalistic view. So therefore, when you're expressing your patriotic pride, you are indirectly contributing and confirming their agenda and giving them more legitimacy. So going back to our substantial and why is it the most important case in this debate? Well, basically, we believe that what mass commercialization did to patriotism is to strip it of any value and to make it a very powerful tool for making people conform. This is a tool of exercising power. Note how nuanced this power is, right? You're not having far-right idea imposed on you, or very nationalistic idea, very often xenophobic idea imposed on you brutally, you have just this ubiquitous display of symbols that makes you conform and that makes you less willing to challenge this narrative in a meaningful way. Right? We believe that this is a very subversive kind of power that we're afraid of having in our society, and it can very often take over people's mind and take over people's idea of patriotism and make them more conforming. Right? This also purports the vision of patriotism that is very shallow. That states that once you've put a flag on your T-shirt, for example, your patriotic duty is done. There is no reflection here. Note how different it is from the old school patriotism that Billy told you is so cool. Because in the old school patriotism, when you had to apply patriotic symbols with moderation, it were your actions that had to speak for you. Your actions had to be patriotic. Now, it is enough to put a flag on your T-shirt, and your patriotic stance is validated through that, even if it is subversive of the opinion of the country at large, right? And even if it most likely conforms to this far right vision, right? Because of that, we believe that we would rather live in a world, and patriotism was something that we remember from the past, where these ideas were sacred, that they were kind of taboo, and you had to express patriotism through your action, rather than to live in a world when you have this very powerful exercise and power that makes you conform and makes your vision of patriotism as shallow and harms minorities and so forth.